I'm Mariana Warmy, and I'm so excited to welcome you to this fantastic and unique event. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm so truly proud of this conference, and what I'm proud about is how many people came together to make this happen. I am just so honored to be a part of as you're going to see, there are so many officials who are going to be speaking to you today, and each one of you is helping to create this special event as well. Human trafficking is an urgent problem. It's endlessly fascinating, and the people who are involved in trying to stop it are wonderful, diverse, talented, and dedicated. What I'm most proud of is to be a member of this anti-trafficking community and to be able to learn from all of you. I want to thank those of you who will be speaking at this event today. That's probably half the room at this point, no doubt. We are so honored by your participation. I want to especially thank those who have gone above and beyond in the planning and collaboration of this event, and that is our planning committee, Emily Marasse, Teddy Silverman, Rose Mukhar, Manoush Kandel, Sarah Lapidus, Ellen Levinson, Benita Hopkins, Ken Coelho, and the visionary behind so much of the important anti-trafficking developments in the Bay Area, Antonia Levine, the coordinator of SFCAHT. I also want to thank Anne-Marie Conroy, Robin Levinson, Susan Susterich, Robin Burke, Tara Anderson, James Schwab, and Ben Horton, and Stacy Botello and Charla Vasquez, who are the saviors of this event. Thank you so much for your support and guidance. And thank you also to the National Council of Jewish Women, the Friends on the Commission on the Status of Women, and Jamel Perkins. Lastly, I want to thank all the attendees today. We need to hear everyone's voice in the fight against human trafficking. This is such a nuanced, complex, and horrific crime that we have to think outside the box. Our hope at SFCAHT is that each of you has an opportunity today to learn from the top experts in Northern California and then have your own voice heard on this issue. So please speak up today. We want to hear your thoughts on how to move forward most effectively now. We want to hear what your policy recommendations are in the workshop. So be paying attention today. You're going to hear from a lot of experts, but we know that it really does take a village with this crime, so please do speak up today. You're going to have that opportunity, and we're counting on you. It's critical, actually. At last year's wonderful conference, our keynote speaker pointed out, before this was co-opted by politics, that we truly are stronger together. So welcome, and thank you to each of you, and I hope you're going to find today very fascinating and beneficial. Thank you.
So we are very lucky here in San Francisco to have strong elected leaders. It's my great pleasure to introduce my dear friend, Assemblymember Phil Ting. You have his full biography in your program, but I just want to say he's a champion for the underdog at all levels, including the countless victims of human trafficking. He's joined today by Deputy District Director Ami Alden. And we also want to thank his district director, Mark Checkelbane, for working with us to secure this conference facility. But please, a warm welcome for Assemblymember Phil Ting.
Thank you, Emily. Such an honor to be here today and be one of your hosts. Let me also just echo Emily's comments and just thank Judge Warming and also Antonia Levine. There are so much work that goes on to putting on a conference like this, but also in staffing this collaborative, because these conferences that we come to once a year, they're very exciting, a lot of ideas. We come together, but then at the end, it falls back on somebody to work on all those ideas and get those issues worked on and make all the things that we're thinking about a reality. So thank you, Antonio. Thank you really to Emily and your department for your hard work, and to really the entire collaborative for everything that you're doing on this issue. Human trafficking is an issue that, Emily was right, a couple years ago really wasn't on everyone's radar. It's an industry that is completely underground. It's an industry that has grown by leaps and bounds without anybody even noticing. It's an estimate that about 17,000 men, women, and children are trafficked every single year. As our global economy has gotten much flatter and much easier to move around. We've seen that it's, again, easier to move people in and out of this country. I can remember back as I was growing up, my ancestry is in Asia, and how hard it was to even travel abroad and to go visit relatives in Taiwan and in China. It was almost impossible because it was so expensive. It was very difficult given all the different relationships. Now, moving between borders, moving between countries is very, very easy. But that's one of the reasons why we have this huge human trafficking industry. It's about $32 billion a year in the entire world. $32 billion. It's absolutely unfathomable. One of the things that we're doing at the state level in particular is to make sure that we're getting more resources to many of the community organizations on the front lines. Last year, in the budget dialogue that we had with the governor's office, there was a lot of discussion about whether we should really be investing more money in prisons and jails, or whether we should really be putting more money into proactive strategies to fight domestic violence, to fight human trafficking. And I'm very proud that based on the work that we did in the Assembly and also in the Senate, we were able to move $10 million of general fund money into the Office of Emergency Services to provide grants to fight human trafficking. And it's really these grants to the agencies that many of whom you're going to hear from today are on the front lines of fighting this industry. And one thing we want to make sure of, as we've also been writing laws and looking at legislation, we don't want to punish the victims of trafficking. We have people who are brought here against their will, people who are forced to work against their will. And the last thing we want to do is to make them the criminal. So what we want to make sure is that as we've written our laws to work to bring in those victims out of the shadows, we also want to work to make sure that they get all the resources and help they need. So I'm very honored to be a partner in this effort because, as Judge Warming talked about, it is a partnership. We are a family because it is so hard that this industry is underground, and you all being here are part of our extended family. So again, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you again, Emily, for being the MC, and also to Antonio for your amazing efforts in bringing us together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Ting. It's so important for us to have supportive elected leaders. We also have in the audience today support from the Consul General of Israel. The Deputy Consul General, Ravit Ber, is with us. Can you identify, wave to folks? This is an important issue that crosses all sort of boundaries. So next I want to welcome Nancy Goldberg to introduce a message from Congresswoman Jackie Speier. Nancy is a former chair of San Francisco Collaborative Against Human Trafficking. She is the force behind the annual poster contest. She does many things in the community, including working with the prisoners in San Quentin with Prison University. Please welcome Nancy Goldberg.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. We are so pleased to share with you today a special video made for us by Congresswoman Jackie Speier. The Congresswoman represents California's 14th Congressional District, which stretches from the southern portion of San Francisco through San Mateo into Redwood City. Some of us may remember that terrible day in 1978 when then Congressman Leo Ryan was shot to death in Jonestown at the compound of the People's Temple, a cult in Guyana that had previously been based in Ryan's district. Speier, then a legislative aide to the congressman, traveled with him on that trip in an attempt to rescue some of the cult's 900 members. Ryan was shot to death with others. Speier was left nearly lifeless on the airport tarmac after being shot 5 times at point-blank range. What does a person do with her life after that? That's unspeakably harrowing experience. Jackie continued with determination, and after being defeated in the U.S. Congress in 1978, 1979, with a loss to Congressman Tom Lantos, Jackie Spears served in the California state legislature until the death of Lantos. At that time, she was appointed to his unexpired term and then ran and won for the United States Congress seat, where she has been serving ever since. Congresswoman Spear has always been a staunch supporter and advocate in fighting for women's rights. She became the first member of Congress to advocate for fundamental reforms to end the epidemic of sexual violence, leading to the fight to this day against sexism in the fields of science and technology. She is also at the forefront of efforts to end discrimination and close the gender pay gap through ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment and passage of the Paycheck Fairness Act. It is interesting to note that during her 18 years in both houses of the California legislature, Spear had more than 300 bills signed into law by both Republican and Democratic governors. Some of her highest profile efforts secured justice for women and children, including a series of bills that led to the collection of more than $2 billion in delinquent court-ordered child support payments. She authored a measure that gave the state the nation's strongest financial privacy law. Congressman Spear has headed multiple programs spotlighting anti-human trafficking activities, trainings, and education. She has been very active in working with others in speaking out at the San Francisco and Oakland airports, conducting awareness training for the employees, and helping everyone to understand why they are magnets for sex trafficking. She also encourages this to be done in hotels and motels. In 2012, Spear stated to the United States on National Human Trafficking Day, citing the Zero Tolerance Initiative in her district, the sexual, and I quote, "the sexual exploitation of young Americans needs to stop now, not tomorrow or next year when another 100,000 adolescents are forced by pimps to sell their bodies multiple times each night. It's time to get the pimps in jail and the girls off the streets. We are doing this in California, and it is now time for the nation to follow." In 1978, Spear needed multiple surgeries after the Jonestown tragedy. While recovering, she realized that she had a choice to make. Did she want to be a victim, or did she want to be a survivor? She has answered that, and this is also the question we must help all the victims of domestic violence and human trafficking to ultimately make. Thank you, and now I give you the Congresswoman.
Human trafficking is one of the fastest growing criminal industries in the world, worth an estimated $150 billion, according to the State Department and the International Labor Organization. They estimate that 20 million people are held in bondage for sex or labor around the globe. These numbers can be overwhelming and hard to comprehend. But one thing is clear. If we want to solve this problem, we have to follow the money. The largest profits are found in sex trafficking. While about 22% of trafficking victims are sexually exploited, they bring in about 2/3 of the profits, or roughly $100 billion. Imagine a sexual slave generates $100,000 per year for her pimp. Of course, the biggest cost of human trafficking is the victim's dignity. Though we can't track the kind of cost in the form of dollars, we can track the profits of perpetrators and hit them where it hurts most. If we can crash their criminal market, we can prevent human trafficking. I first became involved in this issue in 2010. When I learned that between 100,000 and 300,000 girls and boys are trafficked for sex in the United States every year. The average age for a first-time victim is 12 to 14. A trafficker selling 3 minors can easily make $600,000 a year. And unlike the sale of drugs, a pimp can sell a sex slave over and over again. I was appalled by it and determined to help these children. One of the first things I did was to see trafficking with my own eyes. My good friend, Alameda County District Attorney Nancy O'Malley, set up a ride-along on International Boulevard in Oakland. The first victim I encountered was a 16-year-old girl who was only 14 years old when she was forced into a life of sex slavery. I still remember how tiny she was, sitting on this big blue couch, telling me that on average she was sold to 12 to 14 men every single day for sex. What I learned that day shook me to my core, which is why I launched the Zero Tolerance Initiative in San Mateo County. We've come a long way since then. I remember my first conversation with San Mateo Police Chief Susan Mannheimer. When I asked her what San Mateo County was doing about sex trafficking, she looked at me with a puzzled expression and asked, "About what?" We still joke about that today. She, of course, did take action with me, bringing together local and federal law enforcement to develop a plan to address trafficking in our community. We organized numerous trainings for law enforcement, airline and airport workers, and hotel and transportation workers. Within 2 years, we had developed a protocol for law enforcement that is victim-centric and spells out the most effective ways to handle trafficking cases. And we are seeing results. Earlier this year, San Mateo County earned its first conviction for human trafficking, and the perpetrator was sentenced to 13 years in prison. It was a difficult case that took 3 years to prosecute. It might never have succeeded had an alert hotel clerk who was trained to recognize the signs of human trafficking through this program not received the training and called authorities. I also just learned that a case that was brought to the attention of my office by an alert neighbor in Millbrae has led to more arrests, one in San Bruno and one in San Mateo. These examples give me great hope that we can do something about human trafficking, and that the old saying, if you see something, say something, really does work. Of course, I look forward to hearing about all the innovative solutions you will be discussing at the conference today. And I'm confident that we will continue to make headway in the fight against this local and global scourge. Thank you for your continued work on this important issue, and please know that I'm always with you in this fight.
Simply put, I think that human trafficking is a horrific crime and a major, major scar on humanity. This huge criminal industry, believe it or not, is worth $100 billion worldwide. It's the second largest criminal industry in the world behind the drug trade. And California, unfortunately, is a top destination for sex traffickers. Our big cities are major hubs for exploiting victims who are then moved throughout the state and around the world. For the past, my staff and I have been working with law enforcement to try to find solutions to end this crime. And groups like yours are a key ally in that fight. Although we have a lot of work still to do, a number of successful developments and great people give us hope for the future. 2 months ago, the FBI led Operation Cross Country, a nationwide effort to arrest buyers and traffickers, as well as rescue victims. That operation was very successful in our area. Nearly 40 law enforcement organizations worked together to rescue 9 victims and arrest 14 traffickers and 83 buyers. And the buyers are where it's at. Curb demand. Law enforcement collaboration also led to the arrest of Carl Ferrer, the notorious CEO of Backpage.com. It's websites like Backpage that sell juvenile girls, and it's time that we shut them down once and for all. Survivor leaders are also gaining key seats at the table, something that's absolutely necessary for our success. The stories they tell are heartbreaking, but once you've heard them firsthand, you're never the same. I want to say great people are here today. My favorite DA, who's Nancy O'Malley. It's my understanding that Nancy from Alameda County has led 40% of all of the sex trafficking convictions in the state. And I say, right on, Nancy. We have members of Homeland Security, the various district attorneys' offices, and other law enforcement personnel. Thank you so much. As of today, cities, counties, businesses, and nonprofit coalitions nationwide have come together to crack down on the network of criminals who trap and hold young girls to sell, as well as pimps who run them on the streets. As all of you know, there's a seemingly endless supply of buyers, no matter where you go. And it's so distasteful to me, specifically around big events like World Series, Super Bowl events. It's amazing to see the demand for this, and we've got to stop it, and we've got to make people who participate in this industry as buyers of sex responsible, be booked, and yes, even tried and jailed. That issue that should be concerned to all of us is also the growing role of social media platforms, the role they're playing in the recruitment of victims of sex trafficking. In a recent Central Valley case, a trafficking ring used Facebook to recruit, blackmail, and traffic 23 young girls and 28 adults, 51 in all. Ringleaders identified and lured their victims over Facebook, convinced them to take explicit photos, and then threatened to leak the photos if they did not engage in commercial sex acts. My view, let's go out and get them. In another case, a young woman was contacted by several adult men via Facebook Messenger. Eventually, these men worked to sexually exploit her, both in person and over the internet. In this case, 76,000 pages of Facebook messages were recovered by the Alameda County DA's office. Included in those messages were sexually explicit images, many exchanged when the victim was a minor. But these cases are hardly unique. Unfortunately, hundreds of similar cases are occurring in California and across the country. Excuse me. No one should have to endure what victims of sex trafficking are going through. Make no mistake, ensuring that more of our sisters and daughters, our brothers and sons, avoid similar misfortunes won't be easy. So I want to thank you for what you're doing today. I want to wish you great success. And I want to tell you that my staff and I want to work with you in every way, shape, and form. So thank you, and have a great convention.
I want to thank Caitlin. She's been a very active member of the Mayor's Task Force on Anti-Human Trafficking here in San Francisco and a great advocate. Next, we are so fortunate to have with us Savannah Sanders. She is Director of Community Outreach and Human Trafficking Services for Sojourner Center. She's joining us from Arizona, and she is a survivor of trafficking, of abuse, of horrible crimes. And she went on to become an advocate. And she published this book, Sex Trafficking Prevention, a Trauma-Informed Approach for Parents and Professionals. It's on sale today for $20, and she will sign it for you. But before that, she has a very important keynote message for us. Please help me welcome Savannah Sanders.
Good morning. How are you? I'm super excited to see some familiar faces. Love you guys. So my name's Savannah Sanders, and I truly believe that the trafficking that I experienced was preventable. I had a lot of people in my life who could have prevented it from happening if they had the right resources and the right education and the right foundation to build a strong family from. My parents did a lot of education with me when I was younger, and I had the very fortunate experience of having the first 5 foundational years of my life be positive. I had my mom pick me up when I was hungry and feed me, and my dad laughed and played with me. Unfortunately, there was a lot of unresolved generational cycles of abuse that happened within my family system that left me vulnerable to a lot of different types of abuses. And my mom, not knowing that because she had experienced abuse, that I was much more likely to experience abuse as well, even if she wasn't my abuser, because her safety had been broken, and she did not know how to keep me safe because she was never taught what safety was. So my parents did a lot of education with me. You know, if anybody ever touches you, you tell us right away, we'll believe you. All of those things that we tell parents to tell their children when we're providing psychoeducation and resources in the homes and providing counseling in office. We tell parents to talk to their kids openly and honestly and ongoing about sexual abuse. And my parents did the best that they could. My dad was more like a toned-down version of Liam Neeson, so he tried to teach me how to protect myself, right? And none of that would go on to protect me from the 12 years plus of sexual, physical violence that I would go on to experience. So fast forward till when I'm 16, I'm this vulnerable girl on the streets, and we live in a society where parents and professionals and service providers miss vulnerable children all the time. But traffickers and abusers and exploiters do not. They see them from a mile away. And where they are there to exploit them, we should be there to love them and support them through those processes to create strong, resilient children in our communities. And because of that, I feel like if my parents would have had a strong foundation to provide that education and respond appropriately to the abuses that I would go on to experience and be able to know what to do in those scenarios, I would not have wound up being trafficked. I feel like they would have had the wherewithal to be able to understand what I needed in those moments. And instead, they just tried to piecemeal it together from the experiences that they had in their own lives. I did not be able to become this advocate because I had to do my own work first. The reason that I'm able to sit across from somebody and empathize with them and support them and do all of those things that they need from me is because I did them first myself. I had to go through my own healing processes. I had to go through my own therapies and ongoing too, right? Like therapy is a process and we're always growing and learning. But I wouldn't be able to do the work that I'm doing today if I didn't work through my own junk first. And because of that, we talk all in the trafficking movement, there's a lot of systems at play. There's judicial systems and policies and procedures and safe houses and government officials and all of these different players and survivor leaders and all of us kind of coming together and trying to create reform. And all of that stuff is so important to the movement, and we're going to continue to charge forward, and we're going to continue to create change, even with all sorts of bumps in the road and people giving different scenarios over here, and everybody kind of working in their own realms. It'll all come together, and we will create real change. But I want you to remember that sex trafficking and labor trafficking are symptoms of a traumatized world. Okay? And we have to first heal ourselves to be able to do this work that we need to do to be able to move forward. And when we are able to see a kid in our neighborhood and love them, that causes so much change in that one person's life that goes on I'm not saying that we don't need government and policies and procedures to be changed. That's not what I'm saying. They all have their part. But I know within my home, there's 4 children that are highly unlikely to be trafficked because I've been able to focus on them and love them and support them through their processes and grow up resilient, beautiful, amazing advocate people. And I get to do that for other people in my community. And when we stop and we get bogged down, right, by the policies and the procedures and the conferences and all of the things that we go to. And I never want you to stop learning, and I never want you to stop growing as professionals and people that are involved in this movement, because every single one of you have an opportunity to create change. Every single one of you has a piece of this puzzle, and you're all valuable, and you're all worthy, and you're all going to create big changes. But it all is going to start not in these rooms and not outside. It's going to start within your own homes, within your own communities, when you're dropping your kids off at school in the morning, seeing a kid who's walking alone crying, and stopping to make sure that they have what they need. And if they don't, getting it for them. Stopping at the grocery store when you see somebody that's having a hard time or they're struggling with their kid, letting them know they're doing a damn good job, right? Those are the kinds of interactions that are going to create the social change that we really need in this community to create. Because trafficking, like I said, is a symptom. Trafficking is one symptom of many, many issues that we're all here to fight, and they all intersect. Domestic violence, substance abuse, trafficking, sexual assault, all of those things are things that we need to fight. And with trafficking, I feel like we have a perfect storm of oppression and privilege meeting and creating this horrible, horrible crime, where we have people who are oppressed being preyed upon by people who are privileged, and then at the end of the day, we're not addressing traumatized children in our world, which creates more buyers, more traffickers, and more victims. And we have to stop and see these children. I wish I would have had somebody earlier on that would have just saw me sitting at the back of the class, walking down the street crying, any of those things that they could have seen to be able to address the trauma that I was experienced would have prevented me from being trafficked in the first place. And if there's anything that I've learned through all of these experiences and growth and the advocacy and working in the movement and fighting to become a survivor leader when people only just want to hear your story and all of these things that I have had to do, the one thing that I have learned the most, and I want you to take this lens with you no matter what you're doing. If you're working on a policy, if you're working with a client who's sitting in front of you, if you're sitting down at dinner with your grandma, like, I don't care what you're doing, but with this lens, I want you to understand that freedom is not taught. It's experienced. And we have to experience freedom to be able to create freedom in our society. Thank you very much.
I think a lot of us are very eager to hear this discussion. I know I really am. I'm extremely interested to hear what these officials have to say on such topics as what shifts in policy or practice are expected under the new administration, immigration enforcement issues, the controversy of how to address demand, decriminalization of prostitution for minors, and the best strategies for prevention in this criminal market, among many other topics that we're going to cover. It's my honor to introduce this exceptional panel. First, to my right is George Gascon. George Gascon is the district attorney for the city and county of San Francisco and is a household name far outside of this city. In his over 30 years in law enforcement, he has been an assistant chief of the Los Angeles Police Department, chief of police in Mesa, Arizona, and chief of police here in San Francisco, among many other appointments. He has been responsible for many innovations in enforcement and has been a leader in using metrics and technology to improve both organizational performance and public safety. With regard to human trafficking, as we all know, or hopefully know by now, under the leadership of District Attorney Gascon, the San Francisco District Attorney's Office has recently made history with its exceptional anti-trafficking work, which we will, of course, be addressing here. We are so honored that you're here, District Attorney. Thank you. Next to him is one of my favorite people, Elmi Bermejo. Elmy serves as the regional representative for the United States Secretary of Labor, Tom Perez. In 2010, President Obama appointed her to serve as the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs at the U.S. Department of Labor. Prior to this distinguished appointment, she had a long career in public service, including prior posts as a special assistant to 2 state senators and deputy secretary for external affairs for California State and Consumer Services Agency. And on a personal note, I'm not sure if I've ever met anyone who was literally universally liked, and I mean by everyone. And I think probably most of you in this room know her. She's a role model of what leadership should be. I get the feeling that she listens more than she talks, and she shows equal respect to the most vulnerable farm worker and the top officials in Washington. And we are going to pick her brain on one of my favorite topics, labor trafficking. Well, Nancy O'Malley could not be here today. Big surprise, and I'm sure you guys all know what's going on in Oakland. And the fact that I know she very much wanted to be here, but our thoughts are with Oakland. We love Oakland. She is the district attorney of Alameda County, and in addition to her long and distinguished career as a prosecutor, simply put, Nancy O'Malley is the Michael Jordan of anti-trafficking. She did want to be here, but luckily, we have Joni Leventis, who has graciously stepped in. She heads the Alameda County Heat and Sexual Assault Units, so you can bet she has some incredible expertise to share in this discussion. Welcome. Ryan Spradlin, next to her, serves as the Special Agent in charge of Homeland Security Investigations. HSI is the investigative arm of the Department of Homeland Security and has responsibility for investigating a broad range of federal crimes, including financial crimes, human rights violations, cyber crimes, immigration violations, narcotics, transnational gang activity, and, of course, human trafficking. Before becoming the special agent in charge of HSI's San Francisco office, SAC Spradlin served as the deputy special agent in charge of HSI Atlanta and served as a regional intelligence director. And he has good taste in college football teams, so I know he's the best. He likes Florida State, so that makes him the smartest guy on this panel, in my estimation. Right on. Next to him, of course, is Brian Stretch. He is the United States Attorney for the Northern District of California. The Northern District is one of the largest districts in the country geographically and extends all the way to the Oregon border. As the United States Attorney, he oversees all federal prosecutions in a district that has a population of some 8 million people. As U.S. Attorney, he manages 3 different offices and over 200 employees. In addition, as we know, there is the center of the tech industry in his district, our powerful financial industry, and an extremely diverse population politically, culturally, and economically throughout the region, making this a truly unique and complex district from a law enforcement perspective. In addition, you have almost single-handedly energized this entire community with your leadership and support, and we are so grateful to you. You have been an incredible leader for all of us. Next to him is Special Agent in Charge Bennett. John Bennett, earlier this year, was appointed to lead the FBI's San Francisco district. Prior to this appointment as Special Agent in Charge, SAC Bennett served as the section chief of the Digital Forensics and Analysis section in the Operational Technology of the FBI. Try saying that fast. Where he led the establishment of scientific standards for digital media exploitation. And it'll be great to hear what your priorities are as the new special agent in charge and what you see in the future for FBI San Francisco. We're so honored that you're here. And last but not least, Rebecca Marcus. At our conference last year, Victor Wang, who you may know, he was the deputy director of APILO and a judge now. Victor Wang made a policy recommendation at the last conference that, from his broad perspective, what did we need to do next? What would help things? And he said one thing. He said public defenders needed to be brought into the discussion as well, and we agree. And we are so honored that the only publicly elected public defender in California, Jeff Adachi, instantly agreed to participate in this panel. However, he was unable to get out of a trial today. He begged the judge apparently, and he said that he was going to be on a panel with the U.S. Attorney, and he sends his regards to the U.S. Attorney, only to the U.S. Attorney, though I don't know what that means for the rest of us, but anyway. But the judge said no way, and apparently the judge is a former AUSA, so I don't know what that means, but anyway. So he was unable to get out of that, but luckily Deputy Public Defender Rebecca Marcus graciously stepped in, and I'm so eager to hear her perspective on this work, and thank you so much for joining us. I think you'll add a really interesting dimension to the anti-trafficking discussion that we just really haven't considered yet. So I want to start off just by talking about the urgency of this work. U.S. Attorney Stretch, can you talk about a trafficking case that the U.S. Attorney's Office has handled in the last few years that illustrates some common or important principles of trafficking or sticks with you for some other reason? And tell us how that case ended up.
I'd be delighted to. So I want to talk just briefly about a case that our office handled, well, really two cases, because I think it really pulls together the themes of what we're facing as we move forward. So two individuals were prosecuted by our office for using the internet to go ahead and advertise and publicize the use of a minor for prostitution purposes. As we're really fortunate, obviously, here to hear from Jack and Ryan from the federal agencies about kind of their work and really trying to penetrate the issue of using today's technologies to further the crimes of human trafficking and labor trafficking. So the case that we prosecuted recently were two individuals named Crutchfield and Tolliver. They were using the internet to go ahead and advertise the prostitution of a minor. And so through the great work of the federal agents, we were able to go ahead and bring the case, and the individuals ended up pleading guilty and getting 57 months and 60 months as sentences. And part of this, what's so important to us, Judge, is that, as we bring cases, we really are case by case really educating our bench, the federal bench, about what these cases are about, what it really means to be a victim of human trafficking, whether it's sex trafficking, whether it's labor trafficking, and the great tolls and hurdles and obstacles that our victims face when they're caught up in this activity. So what was important for us in bringing this case is that it was really a good opportunity for us to start educating our bench. And for us, we thought they were good sentences. Corollary to that is we also brought a case against the operators of Redbook in an effort to go ahead and stop the use of advertising for sex trafficking and on that platform as well. So I look at those as kind of very key to the focus that our office is going to continue to have in working with, obviously, the great district attorneys that we have here in San Francisco and Alameda who really think long and hard and deeply about the use of technologies and how we can stay ahead of it as a federal government to assist in the intervention.
Thank you. SAC Spradlin, can you talk about the global market nature of demand and supply in human trafficking cases?
Yes. What's interesting and phenomenal, quite frankly, is when you take a look at human trafficking, it's reached over $32 billion worldwide, globally. It's a $32 billion enterprise, and for those of us in law enforcement and throughout the communities, I think people are very, very surprised to learn that it's breathing down the neck of narco trafficking. A lot of us know about drugs. There was the famous war on drugs, and it's breathing down the neck. You're talking about $33 billion versus $32 billion, and it's startling to realize that, and it's growing, and it's starting to realize it's startling to realize that's where it is, considering so many people throughout our communities are unaware. They're not educated about it. I get asked questions all the time that take you aback, to realize that folks in our community, to include in law enforcement in some cases, just aren't educated about human trafficking. Homeland Security investigations, we have over 6,500 agents spread throughout the United States and in 46 countries. So we like to think that we're at the pulse of where this is, where this starts and where it ends. Unfortunately, these traffickers often will draw upon countries or communities that are challenged, that have challenged economies for the victims, and the economies such as the United States that are stronger are where the demand is. So it's really startling to realize that we've hit the $32 billion mark, and it's still growing. When you take a look at it globally, it's a phenomenon that not many people know about.
Thank you. Yeah, adding to that, SAC Bennett, so you're relatively new as the SAC here. Can you just talk about your background and what your priorities are in anti-trafficking enforcement as the new special agent in charge, and maybe address what you see under a new administration in Washington, if it's any different, if it's the same, and what your strategic approach is to human trafficking in the Bay Area?
Sure, and I've done this work for close to 2 decades now, in and out of it. So I've been around the world, and I've seen this not only domestically but internationally as well. As far as the FBI is concerned, we have a pretty good pulse of commercial sex trade in the San Francisco area. We know where the pockets are. We know where the tracks are. What we didn't have good visibility on, and what I've changed since I've come into the office, are 2 other prongs, and that is forced labor and domestic servitude. Those are areas where we've carved out the commercial sex, which generally remains with our crimes against children, violent crimes against children programs, and we've moved the human trafficking program into its own squad, where we're going to be focusing on those 2 elements as well: domestic servitude and forced labor. We have opportunities here, I think, to make some impact. My background coming up through science and technology in the FBI, obviously, as you heard Ms. Springer and Ms. Feinstein speak about the demand. How do we crush that demand? And that demand is not only going after the Johns, but it's also the cash that is involved in that. And cash is not just money changed now, bills back and forth. We're talking virtual currency. We're talking Bitcoin. How do we track that? How do we trace that? That's a whole new world of technology, and a whole new investigator that needs to be developed to start looking at that. So here in San Francisco, we are fortunate enough to be in and around the Silicon Valley, and we have great relationships with the tech companies, and part of this is the business that is in this area that help us educate ourselves on how to be better at this, how to be better investigators, and really look for those victims. At the end of the day, these are victims, and these are people that need to be treated as victims and not as criminals. And we're making sure that is through all our investigations. My agents know that these are victims.
Sort of getting more into specifics about, okay, so this is important, and what specifically are we? There are different approaches to this, and a lot of these things are very controversial, and reasonable people can disagree about this. And so I kind of want to just get a perspective of some of these leaders sitting in for District Attorney O'Malley. So under District Attorney O'Malley, as of 2012, and I think both Feinstein and Spear mentioned this, Alameda County had prosecuted 46% of all human trafficking cases in California. Between 2006 and 2014, Alameda County prosecuted 425 traffickers with an incredible 89% conviction rate. These statistics speak for themselves concerning the efficacy of her strategic approach to this criminal market. And so to the extent that you can address this, and I know you know Heat Watch quite well, in a nutshell, can you explain your current approach to anti-trafficking enforcement at Heat Watch and under Nancy O'Malley? And based on your experience, or what you know of Nancy O'Malley's experience, what's the key to your success in Oakland?
Big shoes to fill to stand in for Ms. O'Malley, because she is the Michael Jordan of trafficking. She's been involved in this before anybody even thought about getting involved in this particular issue. And I think the one thing you know about her and about our office is we're always very victim-focused. And so the current approach really is to look at these individuals, whether they be children or adults, who are being trafficked and exploited as victims and not criminals. And that is why we don't use certain terms that sort of sensationalize or make it more interesting maybe for some of the street folks, we refer to them as exploited victims, and we refer to the purchasers as just what they are, sex purchasers, and those that are putting them out there and making them do this as traffickers. We very much want to change the culture so people look at this at what it is. These are victimized people that need help, and we need to stop the people that are victimizing them, which is what we've done with every crime for the longest period of time. But sadly, people that are exploited get looked at as if they're part of the criminal system, or they are the criminals themselves. I think what's made us most successful is this sort of five-prong approach that we've taken from the very beginning when we started our HEAT team and the HEAT Watch program, and that is community engagement. As people have said, if you see something happening, a lot of people turn their heads and walk away instead of trying to help and call for a child or a woman or a man that apparently is in need of help because they are being trafficked. We have very much been involved in training law enforcement and trying to explain to them that they need to be sensitive to the victims of these crimes so that there's a trauma-informed approach and we don't further traumatize them. Vigorous prosecution, obviously, somebody on the team that I'm newly supervising, the HEAT team, has become part of my assignment, just had 3 defendants that were sentenced to various base terms to life in prison on a trafficking case just last week. I'm going to say that name because I'm very proud of him. That was Neil Layton from our team, and so I want to just give him a shout out on that. We have 5 attorneys that are dealing with labor and sex trafficking on the HEAT team. We've got designated inspectors to do the investigations, and we've got designated advocates that are there to help those victims get through the system. We are also educating policymakers and advocating for things that are better in terms of what happens within the laws with the policymakers. And just really, in the end, there's this wraparound kind of service or assistance for our victims and our survivors. It's, they say it takes a village, right? And it's that full approach of getting everybody involved that I think has made our office really successful in this area.
Thank you. District Attorney Gascon, you have plenty to talk about as well. Earlier this year, the San Francisco District Attorney's Office made history in a landmark case, People v. Jeter, which involved a San Francisco man sexually trafficking 2 girls, ages 14 and 16. The prosecution in this case was the first under Proposition 35, or otherwise known as the CASE Act, which passed in 2012. And this case resulted in a 97-year sentence for the defendant. Is Ronnie in the room?
She is.
Yay, Ronnie. A legend. In your opinion, District Attorney, what were the key factors to your office's success in this groundbreaking and urgent case? And maybe even more importantly for the rest of us, how can these lessons be translated into best practices for the rest of us moving forward?
No, absolutely. There were a combination of things, but before I go on, I want to thank Rani for her incredible work. A lot of her work not only was long hours, but she was actually under physical threat at some point, and we actually had to work around her personal security and that of her family in this case. So this was a very traumatic case. But there were a lot of good partners. The San Francisco Police Department did incredible work in the early stages. Then in our own crime strategies unit, Kim Hunter, who is here as well, who has become sort of the guru of data mining when it comes to sex trafficking, was the one that really started to do some incredible work with the help of the San Francisco Police Department and the work of our own district attorney investigators, and really helping Ronnie and the police department putting a case together, identifying additional victim. So there was a tremendous amount of work there. Our victim services, we're fortunate to have one of the best, I believe, victim services unit in the country, and it's comprised of people that are really not only personally dedicated but very well trained. And there was Delia Montiel, who also did incredible work in keeping the victims, making them feel important, and ensuring that their needs were attended to. But I would say that the key factors here were, first of all, was I would say that the use of data was really critical to this case. Have we not had the level of sophistication that we have and the capacity that we have in our office to go deep into the web and be able to link information, we would not have been as successful as we were with this case. In fact, I don't think we would have had a prosecutable case. Then, again, I want to say the victim services component was incredible because these victims were, not only they were very vulnerable, they're still very vulnerable, but they have been damaged by some horrible experiences. And being able to get them together and quite frankly, go through the trauma of a trial, because trials are very traumatic for victims as well, that was important. And then, the prosecution, and then the help of the community, especially in the advocacy, the nonprofits, everybody came together. And I think that the lessons learned here is, first of all, that these cases cannot be successfully prosecuted just simply because you have good lawyering. That is critical. But it's an entire, I'm going to use our Alameda County counterpart here, the term, it's the entire village coming together. And this was a perfect case where the police, the prosecution, data mining, our victim services, and people in the community, everybody came together, number one, to ensure that the victims were protected, because that has to be the first and central issue in these cases, is protecting the victim and ensuring that the victims are going to be assisted through the process and beyond the process. And then number two, getting everybody together to be able to prosecute the case successfully. I cannot overemphasize the importance of teamwork in this kind of cases.
Yeah, thank you. And Ronnie will be presenting in a workshop getting into sort of the specifics, some technical things about that case as well. So I'm going to be sitting in on that for sure. Regional Representative Bermejo. Many people may be unfamiliar with the role of the Department of Labor in the fight against human trafficking, and yet your agency plays an absolutely critical role, particularly in labor trafficking cases. What is the Department of Labor's role in anti-trafficking? What do you consider DOL's most significant achievements in fighting human trafficking so far? And what can we in the anti-trafficking community learn from your experiences in your agency?
In March of 2012, President Obama established the President's Interagency Task Force to monitor and combat trafficking in persons. And this was to strengthen federal efforts to combat human trafficking. It convened leaders from government, the private sector, advocates, survivors, communities of faith, civil society, law enforcement, and academia to implement coordinated agenda that helps prevent trafficking, protect victims, and prosecute offenders. The seventh and final cabinet-level meeting was held about a month and a half ago, or not long ago, and during this was the last meeting during this administration. And the Secretary of State, John Kerry, and other members of the President's Interagency Task Force met at the White House to report on the progress made within 4 priority areas: the rule of law, victim services, procurement, and supply chains, and public awareness and outreach, which goes back to the whole theme of it takes a village, because everybody has a role. And so it's how we all come together to make sure that we are combating this. And while more work is required to tackle the root causes and consequences, the U.S. continues to be a leader in a global movement to end modern-day slavery. The Department of Labor's role is, as I said, we emphasize that at the department that the Department of Labor does not investigate or prosecute trafficking in persons. We have an important role to play in both within the department's core equities and as partners to our sister agencies in the federal government. We have oriented our work in this space around 3 strategic missions: supporting law enforcement by detecting this crime, calculating back wages that are owed to victims, addressing underlying conditions of labor exploitation, engaging in international research, technical assistance, and monitoring, especially on the worst forms of child labor, and also contributing to the provisions of employment and training services to survivors. We are dedicated at the Department of Labor to enhancing the well-being of workers, improving working conditions, and assuring work-related benefits and rights. And the welfare of the worker is at the center of the department's mission and the foundation of our efforts. So we focus on the worker, their working conditions, and the labor market. the department strives to target the conditions of vulnerability that undermine hardworking men, women, and youth in this country and their ability to work with dignity. The Department of Labor is one of the 14 departments and agencies on this interagency task force. And aside from the not only our International Labor Bureau, ILAB, we also have our Wage and Hour Division, which does critical work in this, and it enforces the federal labor standards law. So we're looking at it from people who are being exploited. They are being made to work without being paid overtime, or whether being paid. One example we have is there are people in Silicon Valley who were brought in to work at a technology company, and they were paid about $1.21 an hour, and they were being paid in rupees. So think about that. So we have investigators who, we talked about it, this is a village, and somebody says, something's not quite right. We should look into it. And we have our Wage and Hour Division that looks at those kinds of inequities and starts talking to people. One of the things that happened that I think is critical under this administration has been the increase in the department's funding to look at some of these labor violations. So we have what we call community resource and education specialists who do outreach, not just outreach, but very targeted outreach. Like, what are the industries? Is it restaurants? Is it, rest homes where people are being made to work around the clock? The garment industry. So they get to know communities, folks in that community, and find out if people feel comfortable, because you have to also feel safe that someone's going to help you. And those
how do you even target those industries that you prioritize? Do you know?
Well, I think you start hearing from people about, like in Los Angeles, we did a big investigation of the garment industry. And, now that it's Christmas time, some of the people who were on the top list of abusers or perpetrators of the labor force were Ross, Forever 21,
really?
TJ Maxx.
Oh,
and
really?
So we have a report that I can send out to folks about that and how it was conducted.
Has that gotten a lot of press?
It got a lot of press in Southern California, but clearly we need to make sure that we're talking about this with as many people as possible.
It's that mainstream, though. This
exactly.
is where we're all shopping.
Yes, but I also just wanted to make sure that we have because our Wage and Hour Division looks at minimum wage, overtime, child labor, record keeping, family and medical leave, migrant workers, worker protections, and prevailing wages for government service and construction contracts. So if you're getting a federal contract, you should be paid the minimum wage or prevailing wage for those types of jobs. So we're also looking at federal contractors that they're not abusing, that they're not getting money from the federal government and then not paying their employees well. And we make a clear distinction between labor exploitation, and that is, to us, the mistreatment of workers in violation of civil labor laws, and labor trafficking, which adds on the elements of force, fraud, coercion, that then becomes a criminal offense. So we have a broad continuum of labor exploitation that is inherently connected to labor trafficking, but sometimes does not rise past the criminal threshold. We can look at trafficking to be understood as a tip of a larger iceberg of labor abuses. And the department's efforts to combat the broader continuum of labor exploitation by enforcing the statutes entrusted to us, and that's the Fair Labor Standards Act. So we enforce over 180 federal laws. And trying to make sure that we do as much education, we do as much outreach as possible. And we try to get very creative. I was in Hawaii and did a roundtable with vulnerable workers. And one of the young men who works in the field and does a lot of the outreach decided that he was going to go and play soccer and see and talk to people. That's where we try to go to where people are. And he took a soccer ball, and on it, he put Empleo. We have a program called Empleo that reaches out to vulnerable communities, in particular immigrant workers. And on the soccer ball, he painted the word Empleo and a 1-800 number. Because sometimes you just can't go to someone and say, I am being trafficked, help me. because you don't know who's watching, folks. But you could say, oh, this is interesting. What is this? And then someone can say, well, write that number down, call me, and we'll talk about it. So we try to figure out creative ways to reach as many people, to educate the public. And we have programs in Spanish, and we started also the Empleo Pinoy to the Filipino community. A lot of folks were working in some of the facilities that are taking care of elderly folks, and sometimes those people were not being paid. Anyway, so those are some of the ways that we are out there trying to make sure that we are reaching out, education, and then, of course, sharing that information with our sister agencies.
Soccer balls. That's brilliant.
Isn't that brilliant?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is. It's genius because, I mean, a lot of people play soccer and very smart. The U.S. Attorney's Office, U.S. Attorney Stretch, has been very successful in bringing federal prosecutions, and you talked about some of those. Red Book, unbelievable, Crutchfield and Tolliver, and the horrors of the Omar Ahmad case involving the trafficking of 2 underage boys. From your perspective, are these some of your office's biggest anti-trafficking successes over the years? What is there? Is there something that you think that your office has done over the years that is particularly important in anti-trafficking?
I do. I mean, the cases are incredibly important. And as you've heard today, the district attorneys from around the Bay Area are really leading the charge with the prosecutions. They have such wonderful, experienced prosecutors to handle this. They have wonderful setups with their victim witness units to be able to manage these. So the volume of the cases are being done by the district attorneys. We do a handful of cases each year, and I think those cases are very, very important to do. I think our role from the federal government, at least from our office, is the ability to go ahead and kind of unite and bring together the various task forces from around the Bay Area. So starting about 5 years ago, we host an annual summit on human trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, to not only bring the task forces from around the Bay Area that are doing very, very important work but don't often talk to one another. We ensure that once a year that everybody is in the same room talking about their law enforcement successes, what's working best for them, what are transportable to other task forces from around the Bay Area, and what we need to work on as we move forward. So one of the roles that the federal government can do, in addition to doing the appropriate cases when they arise, is to really facilitate and the collaborative work of the task forces from around the Bay Area. If you look at what SFCAHT does, we're here today, and how this has grown to be such a real leader in this area. You look at the work of Sharon Denoa down in the South Bay Coalition, and the work that Joni does over in the East Bay, and what George does here in San Francisco. And it's happening everywhere around the Bay Area, but keep in mind that oftentimes the jurisdiction is right there within their counties. In the Northern District of California, our federal judicial district is 15 counties. So we go from south of Monterey all the way up to the Oregon border. And so we look at our responsibility, again, not only to work with Ryan and HSI and Jack with the FBI to identify and investigate and prosecute the appropriate cases, but to, again, really coordinate the efforts of everybody together. Look no further in my mind to last February with the Super Bowl, when everybody came together in the Bay Area to make that a very important law enforcement success, in my view. But that took a lot of hard work and a lot of communication among the various counties and the various task forces, the federal agents, the state agencies, our NGOs, to make sure that people were educated, the hotel industry was educated, the restaurant industry was educated about what to look for when the Super Bowl comes to town. And so I think that's a big piece of what our office does, is to make sure that everybody is coordinating and talking to one another, and making sure that the good work that's being done in the various parts of the Bay Area is being shared, and everyone's benefiting and learning from the successes.
Thank you.